Start, I guess. So I did my doctorate in creative writing. I always wanted to be involved in creative fields, but more from a narrative perspective. And the actual game aspect of it didn't come into play until a few years ago, when I spent a lot of time hanging around the games lab at my university just because it was fun. I always loved games. I spent a lot of time playing games when I was a kid. My family really supported that as a hobby, but I never really thought of it as a games career option. So spending a lot of time in that lab and realising it was a research opportunity for me, I then kind of transitioned into that and used a lot of the skills I had from my doctorate in creative writing and my undergraduate in other creative fields during that transition. And so now I'm managing director of a charity in games, and I do a lot of things in the games industry.
I guess I just started off as a young kid that loved playing games when you get the opportunity to. And moving into, I guess, work with esports and streaming, I found a very strong pull towards the game StarCraft. And watching that on the internet and watching the competitive nature of it really allowed me to just go, oh wow, this is something that could be not even just a career path as a player, but something that is interesting as an audience. But also the fact that streaming as a medium was coming up was something that was brand new to me. Got completely involved in it and now start managing a couple of streamers, content creators that just play games. And then I guess after that, working with Twitch Mobile, bringing all those people that have a common interest to an area, a space for them to really just understand what they really enjoy, making sure that they're all good, and I guess that's it.
So I originally could not stop playing games, loved it, and so when I found out that there were all these incredible teams playing together, practicing together, I really found a passion for professional gaming. So I entered into a team, and it was incredible to be playing alongside amazing friends. And people who shared the same passion as me, and that's when I slowly transitioned to esports. Slowly I kind of got into the business side of things as well, so that's how it started for me.
So I kind of just fell into working in this area. Did an undergrad, didn't know what to do, so I did a master's, didn't know what to do. So I did another undergrad, partially, in the, up until recently, Serious Games program at the University of Sunshine Coast. And partway through that first semester, realised that doing an undergrad again after doing a master's program was a little too unfulfilling. And so talked to some of the staff members there, and they're like, you know what, just how about we employ you to teach this stuff, and then started my doctorate, which I'm about to submit for the final time. Probably once Games Week is over and I can go home and finish it. So yeah, I just kind of happened to stumble into this, and it's been something that I always kind of cared about, but didn't really realise I could make a go of it. And I've just been kind of stumbling through doing interesting things ever since then.
So you all identified yourselves as people who love to play games and as gamers, and I think that you're speaking to an audience of games researchers, games user researchers, game developers, etc. And so something I often hear from people when I'm talking to the media is like, oh, you're so lucky to make a career out of something that you're so passionate about. And I'm just like, no, not anymore. I'm not passionate about it personally anymore because it's work now. It's not play. And I'm wondering, has working in games ruined them for you?
Yes. I absolutely don't know the last time I played a game for fun. And even when I do try to play games for fun, I accidentally start working and then go, no, and then suddenly I write a paper about it, and it hurts. I can't do it for fun anymore. I need new hobbies.
It's funny because when you start talking to streamers where their job is to play a game for entertainment purposes, they always seem to forget and have the same kind of problem. They don't know when they're being entertainers and playing the game, or when they get time to actually just sit down, not actually have to broadcast themselves and play the game for fun. It's a common problem, and I guess when you're passionate about it, that line blurs and then it completely flips.
I have a lot of friends who play games professionally, and they get to a certain level and when it sort of gets to that point, you know all about the game, the insides and out, and I think that can sort of ruin the fun sometimes. You know, it feels like you aren't exploring the game as much. So I feel like, you know, they're probably limited to that. But otherwise, I guess from my perspective, there are certain games that, you know, I don't have as much fun in them as I used to, but I guess, you know, that's when you go and explore new games.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I enjoy doing a lot of the boring stuff, like doing criticism and analysis. Like, I'd still get a kick out of that. So even if I'm working, it's still kind of, I get a type of joy from it. But yeah, I definitely feel like that line of pure pleasure and work gets blurred, and you don't always have the opportunity to sort of go into playing something with only one mindset to work with.
And like the biggest issue for me, I think, is that because the line starts to blur between is it work, is it play, suddenly you're doing what is essentially your job, and it's 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. and you're like, am I enjoying this? I don't know. Am I working? Is this paid? Is it not? Like that line makes it really difficult. And I know that's a problem a lot of academics have in a whole bunch of different fields, where you just accidentally work into the night and you don't really realise that you're doing that. And it's particularly hard when you're studying in an area that is also a hobby, because work-life balance.
Academia and games is a good idea.
I think dissertations ruin everything. That's just a given, right? So,
That's it.
we had a diversity and inclusion workshop yesterday that I was part of organizing, and we talked about this kind of attitude in the games industry. And I think I don't know as much about the competitive esports industry as the games industry, but this idea that it's such a privilege to be working in this field, to be working on games, that you should be just grateful for the chance to work until midnight on your passion, and it's an attitude that I think we see a little bit changing in the industry. I'm wondering what is the corollary in the competitive esports world for Stephanie Miguel. Is it, you know, when this is your profession because you're competitive at games and not your profession because you're a maker of games or a studier of games? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that when you're a professional gamer, or you know, let's just say for my sake, I work with a lot of streamers that their main income is to sit there and stream. They don't know, they kind of struggle to find that, you know, they bring themselves down. They think they need to bring people down to the point where they still realise that they're entertainers, and if they're a professional, that they're not playing for thousands of dollars week in, week out. Most of the guys that do play professionally, you know, go week to week playing for low tournaments, you know, I guess, and then there's one maybe once every 3 months or something. But at that time, everyone looks at them as these professional players that are akin to sports stars, where, you know, there is a lot of potential there to get to that sports star level, but at the present moment, there's not, because how do you justify a computer game tournament at the present moment? It's getting there, but a lot of people need to know the ins and outs of it to understand that it is an intricate and competitive space.
I think in Australia in particular, the esports industry isn't actually as big as other countries. Like in America, Europe and Asia, they have massive tournaments, massive prize pools. But, you know, I definitely agree with what Miguel has said about competitive playing, in the sense that, you know, it is sort of over-glorified. You know, a lot of these players, you know, they have their day job, they come home and they practice the game for like 4 or 5 hours, go to bed, do it all over again every day, every week, and you know, it's all based off that chance that, you know, you might qualify for this tournament, you might get that prize money, you might, you know, become that star player, and you might get a lot of attention from that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that idea that it's a privilege to work hard is a bit misleading, right? Like, definitely, you know, a lot of other factors come into it, but this is something that they work at. It's not something they just happily fell into one day and were like naturally like one of the best in the world, and they've just kind of cruised by not doing any hard work. Like, you have to practice, you have to sell yourself, you have to compete and perform on the day. It's not, like, it is work. You are being an athlete, and the idea that I think a lot of fans think that they could just sort of stumble into it is unfair to all the effort that gets put in.
Absolutely.
Since we're on the topic of esports and competition, I was going to kind of gently lead into the whole like diversity and inclusion questions, but I'm just going to go in for it now since we're here. So, In esports, there's some controversy around female-only teams and tournaments. Some believe that they're a great way to encourage and represent women in an area that's otherwise dominated by men, whereas others argue that there is no reason, unlike in physical sports, perhaps to separate the sexes. So what are your takes on this?
So I guess my first experience with being a woman in esports was with WPGI, which is Women's Professional Gaming League. So what happened is it's a tournament. They focused on CS:GO, and we initially started with 4 teams. Over 3 seasons, which I think lasted about 2 or 3 years, the amount of teams actually doubled. So we actually had 8 teams playing, and they were all females. So there's 5 females in each team, and you can have 1 or 2 extra substitute players in case anything happens. So through that there was a lot of controversy around it. There was a $10,000 prize pool, and there was a lot of male members in the community that weren't too happy about it. They were talking about the level of skill wasn't on par with say this team, for example. But having competed in it, spectated, and worked in the tournament, I think that the tournament organisers did great in trying to include women. They tried to provide a platform for women and actually show them that this is a possibility for you, and it was just an opportunity that they tried to give. I think rather than tearing down something like that, I think we should be trying to empower people and trying to give them the opportunity to accomplish things and explore new things as well.
I think every space in games struggles with that idea of trying to make that space inclusive and safe for women. I don't work in esports, but in development and looking just at my female students, or even in the work that I do trying to support marginalised creators and marginalised players of games, the more opportunity that they have to find people similar to them kind of gives them the leg up to make their way and to really find their space in mixed gender or mixed race or mixed sexuality kind of spaces as well. So I think that giving them the opportunity to test out esports and to play at that competitive level with just other women and to feel safe in that space gives them the freedom to then, if they want to go into mixed leagues, to do that as well. And they might not otherwise do that. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I think it's a safe kind of space for people who might not otherwise be involved in something.
In my past life as an athlete, I always found it easier to improve when I was training or competing against people who were better than me. And I think the idea that we have these open competitions where anyone of any gender can participate is all well and good, but they're not actually being given the chance to practice and play against the top tier teams. So these competitions that are women only are really good for allowing them to play against people of comparative skill levels and get the exposure to top tier play that they wouldn't otherwise get, because there isn't really a significant difference between quality except for the opportunities. So
why are you making the assumption in your answer? And I'd like you to just explain a little bit more about why the female players are playing at a lower level. Your answer snacks over there, because your answer was kind of part of the kind of precursor to your answer.
Yeah, I don't think that there is a significant difference. I just think that underlying sexism is at play. The assumption that male players are better skilled or easier to market or whatever, as well as the spaces being actively hostile. Women players are not likely to put up with. I mean, I'm assuming most people have seen Twitch chat on pro games and stuff. Anytime there's even an ad, for instance, with a woman in it, the chat is just gross. So imagine that being your workplace all the time when you're trying to prove yourself, right? I wouldn't want to put up with that. No one else should either. So it's already a hostile environment. You have to be twice as good to get half as much credit, which is ridiculous.
I was just going to say, what we were saying before about this sort of stuff being work, when you don't have the opportunity to put in as much practice because you're not being given that opportunity, or you don't feel safe in the environments that might give you that opportunity, then it is much more difficult to become as good as the people who are being given the leg up. So yeah, I get that.
So just because we're talking about opportunity and where it comes from and interest, and because a lot of this happens at a very young age and sort of gets formed very, very young as part of our hobbies, and then kind of continue with it as we go. One thing that was that actually Kaylee MacArthur has looked at in some of her research around makers and maker culture. And so when we think about, and I just learned about this yesterday, so I'm going to try and paraphrase. When we think about how we get introduced to making games through things like hackathons and game jams, there are spaces that may not feel safe for certain people, for women, for LGBTQ, for people who might not want to be there for 24 hours. It's all for people with families, for people with caring responsibilities, kind of you can go on and list. And if this is the introduction to making games, then we're not giving people the opportunity to get into the space in the first place. Yeah. So I'm wondering if you have anything to say about that from your perspective as a researcher or as with your foundation.
Like just as a quick kind of example, what you're saying about game jams, totally agree. And one of the things that we do as part of Queerly Represent Me is ensure that there are opportunities that don't necessarily involve being in a physical space, spending 24 hours in that space. We do a lot of digital game jams. We make them go over a much longer period of time so that people can still produce work and get feedback on that work without needing to constantly make a game for 48 hours. We have Discord communities and online communities that allow people to still get feedback and form teams and meet new people without needing to be from an area that they can actually get to a physical venue. That means we have more regional players, we have regional developers rather, we have more people who have never made a game before who feel supported but they don't feel as nervous showing up somewhere and not being sure they're going to be able to find someone to work with. We have more people who have day jobs because they get like a 2-week period and they can make something small in their evenings or weekends. So just by kind of trying to break the mold a little bit and trying to do a similar thing but in a different way, that's one of the ways that we're kind of trying to give marginalised groups a leg up, rather than just allowing the people who have that opportunity, trying to appeal to a larger, broader audience.
And we do a bunch of stuff through the university as well, trying to, target high schools and get kids sort of interested in the idea of making games as early as possible. Digital or online-only stuff is really helpful for breaking the mold, but it does also mean that people who don't have reliable access to internet, like most of Australia, don't actually get to take advantage of that as well as they otherwise might. So I think the sort of broad approach of trying a lot of different things to help as many people as possible get access to making stuff is really good, and promoting really easy tools like Twine and stuff, like allowing newbie devs to try their hand at something that isn't super intensive code-wise or graphically or whatever, so they can sort of just play around with it and find where their interest lies and sort of start to view themselves as creators, not just players, or sort of even just get into games for the first time ever.
At this point, if anyone in the audience has any questions that they'd like to ask, you can get someone with a mic to come around. Kelly, you have a mic? So does Kelly.
Hi. Question. So I've had a lot of experience with Overwatch and Heroes of the Storm with, as soon as I try to shot call or have some sort of emergent leadership, it is immediately challenged with sit down, sweetheart. Sit down. And, of course, all the rest of the comments follow. Do you guys have any suggestions with how you kind of combat that as a woman or a minority or something else in the community in terms of this leadership has to happen? On pro teams, there's shot callers and they're dedicated shot callers and they're that because they make good decisions and they have good communication skills. So how can we kind of change the culture, or how can we kind of, deal with that?
So, yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. It happens to me a lot. The number one thing I do is you never let it get to you. I think just like in real life, anyone who says something bad about you or tells you that you aren't good enough, you don't want to tune into those sort of those comments. You want to be focusing on yourself, focus on what you can do, and if there are really toxic players who are still constantly trying to say these things about you, there's the mute button. It's really simple, just mute them and you won't hear them, and it's just a really simple thing like that. Just don't give in and just focus on yourself. That's what I'd say.
Well, I guess the problem is when it affects the team performance, right?
Yeah.
Like if they're so focused on you or you being whatever you're doing, or I'm not pocketing you because you're the DPS and you're getting all the kills when you have 4 other players to worry about. So I guess what I'm wondering is how you kind of deal with that when it's affecting the team performance, and I'm in it to win it. I'm not about to, let somebody ruin it, but that also ruins the rest of the team, not just for me.
Like, it's incredibly unfair, and I really, I don't have an answer. As someone who just likes to play multiplayer games, I know friends who use voice changes so that they don't sound like women. I know a lot of people who who use text to do calls, but obviously that's too slow. And there are so many people who just don't use voice chat at all, and it's at such a detriment to the overall game experience. And so I think that's why so many men who play these multiplayer games just think women don't, because they never hear them. And it's because we're all playing silently because we don't want to have to deal with the crap that we get. I don't have an answer, but I do have a heck of a lot of empathy. It sucks.
Yeah, I don't think that's really an easy solution. I don't think even that there is anything that you can or should have to do to change the culture, because you're the one being attacked, you're the one being marginalised, it's not your responsibility to fix it. I play a lot of competitive games as well, and even people that I play with that I consider friends and as typically well-adjusted, normal human beings, as soon as we end up with a random player on our team who is a woman, they lose their shit, and I don't understand why. But then it's on me as an ally to call them out on that bullshit, because it just doesn't fly, right? It does affect the team's performance, and I'm also in it to win it, and I don't want my friends being idiots because someone has a feminine voice to jeopardize my win or make them feel uncomfortable. They're just another player, roll with it. But yeah, I don't get it. And it really frustrates me as well, and I'm not even the one being targeted, so I would hate to be on the other end, and I'm just not really sorry that it happens.
I feel like it's really embedded into the culture, if you know what I mean. It just sort of happens, and I find that it's most common with random players. If you have a good experience with, a teammate, and, if he's not putting you down, he's just being really nice, add that person, talk to them, play with them again. It's just slowly sort of filtering out your friends and finding out the ones that work for you and the ones that don't.
Yeah, trying to end up eventually with people, even if they're not close friends, but people that you're happy to play with, so you don't have to run the risk of running into, one of the other ones, is really helpful. But yeah, there's definitely still a limited supply of people who you can tolerate, so.
And also, if you do end up with people who do the ally thing really well, that just actively call out the other people on the team, just telling them you appreciate it is a nice way of encouraging that behaviour. It doesn't necessarily need to be encouraged, but the peer pressure is hard. So just being thanks for not succumbing to it might keep them doing that in future games as well.
Yeah.
Game devs are looking, especially multiplayer games, are looking at ways to combat that. A lot of things though do have, still play to the element of still being silent. So you said you played Heroes of the Storm. You can understand the remote wheel that shows you, I need help here, let's go over here, the alert. It still brings the fact that you need to stay silent and not say anything. So all the points here are perfect. We've got nothing, I can't give you a reason for that, but you're right. Allies that need to stand up for the crap that gets thrown at you, to anyone, being a poor leader is worse than being a bad teammate. So, I'm so sorry you get that, but at the same time, it's a difficult question to answer.
And it's not just a games problem either, I think. It's we need to do more, just in general, in society to stop being just jerks to everybody, right? Marginalised people don't deserve to get in the street and in the safety of their own homes.
There is a sign on a church just outside that's let's accept refugees. We're not doing well just across the board with marginalised groups of people, and we really need to sort that out.
It leads to a very practical question, though, about how can you be a good ally? How can you speak up in defense of somebody who's being marginalized or discriminated against because of their identity? Because for someone who's in a position of privilege, I consider myself from a very privileged position, there's not much cost to me to call somebody out. But for someone who is themselves marginalized, or who is trying to rise up the ranks of life in general, it can be very intimidating or you don't want to come off as like that very preachy person. So do you have, advice on how to actually call people out on their shit?
Like, I think all of us have gone through, to some extent, that kind of high school, don't be a bystander thing that happens around bullying, right? It's the same, but on the internet. Like, just simply saying, hey, I don't think that behavior is acceptable, does a lot to make someone feel like they aren't doing something that is actually as cool as they think it is. A lot of the time, this sort of bullying behavior comes from them thinking that the people around them is going to think it's funny, or that it's cool, or that, they're a cool guy because they're flirting with the one woman on the team really aggressively. So if the people on the team with them say, hey, that's a bit gross, I don't think that's funny, or I don't think that's cool, or I don't think that's acceptable, that does, even if they go, oh, you're not cool then, like, it still does something. It makes the person who is being bullied feel like they have an ally, feel like they have someone on their team. And it makes the person kind of second guess what they've said. So it might not in the moment make them say, oh yeah, you're right, thank you for that well-constructed argument. I'm going to get back to playing games now. But they'll take that with them, and the more that they get called out on that behaviour, the more that they will change their behaviour.
And maybe if they get called out enough, they'll stop having fun and they'll just go and cry in their bed or something. So, I mean, that's a win for everyone else, right?
Yeah, it's also cool.
And maybe they'll reflect and learn.
Maybe.
I mean, I don't hold a lot of hope, right? Like, there's a lot of people who are just committed to being like a scumbag. But I think if we do call it out, like, I try to be really direct. Like, don't be soft, be to the point. Like, that's not cool, cut it out. And then also trying to leverage what their other sort of goals might be. Like, we've got to focus on X or whatever. Like, turn them onto something that they might care about. Maybe not more, maybe they're more passionate about making other people uncomfortable, but if it's the next best thing for them, maybe it'll give them something else to sort of work towards.
Yeah.
I don't know why I even bother to care about their feelings or wants, but it does seem to have
Offering an alternative
success.
Offering an alternative is one of the best ways to call someone out. So even with things like if they use a language that isn't okay, so if they're using insulting, discriminatory language, it's often not enough just to say don't say that word. You need to do things like, instead of saying that, why don't you say X, Y, or Z? And it makes it so easy for them to then use something else that they can kind of associate that. So obviously there is a point where they need to sort of want to learn for that to work, but the more that you can offer alternatives as part of the call out, the more likely it is that it will actually work.
I think also at the same time it's so important to realise that these people are behind a computer screen, they're completely anonymous. That gives them so much power, they think they have that power. In a lot of cases, a lot of people who've said things to me online, they don't have the guts to actually say that to me in real life. They're just saying it because they're behind a computer screen. Games, I guess, for some people have also sort of become an outlet for them to unleash, toxicity as such.
They're not always anonymous though. I played rugby league against two guys who were just using constant slurs, and they had their team website up on their Steam account, so I got their sponsorship pulled. So
Just send an email to the right person.
yeah, there can be repercussions, and there should be repercussions. So if people want to brag about being on esports teams and also use homophobic slurs and stuff, then punish them for it. I don't feel guilty. I feel really satisfied about it. So go and do it for yourselves. It feels great. But yeah, you shouldn't get away with it. You shouldn't be able to sit there anonymously and just cause more hate, right? There should be something that you have to deal with, some sort of personal cost to being a jerk.
We have another question.
And it's a related question, so it's a really interesting discussion, and I'm reflecting that from a very early age, our children play in gendered teams. So when we play competitively from a very young age, we're playing football or soccer or cricket or what do you play? Hockey. Do you play mixed hockey?
No.
And I was sort of trying to run through which sports are mixed. I mean, I got to tennis, a bit of intermittent tennis playing, but I can't think of much. And I do wonder whether some of what you're talking about is actually, it comes from a lot earlier, and boys aren't used to playing with girls, and girls, may not be used to playing with boys, even in the playgrounds, and there's an educative part to that. So I was kind of mulling over that. I don't think that's a question, but then I was thinking maybe it's about, we have an opportunity. You know, we are one of the places where we do have the opportunity to have strong mixed teams. And, you know, we know that females are playing and males are playing, and maybe it's about finding some really great role models and trying to push that out into the community. And I just wondered if you thought that there were opportunities around, you know, that educative aspect. So trying to, I think it's great to call people out, but can we also show good examples and what might work and how it might work?
Definitely. There is a multitude of women on Twitch who stream that are unbelievably good at their game, but they kind of just sit there and do it as an entertainment. That's their job. But, you know, I'm recalling a number of streamers who are now who are ex-professionals that are out there advocating the fact that, you know what, it doesn't matter about my gender, I'm actually going to nail this, I'm going to own it. I mean, talking historically, Scarlet in StarCraft 2 is absolutely killing the scene. You've got Livy Beard in Sydney who played professionally a few years ago. It doesn't matter, we've got to start putting the role model out there, whether it be as a professional player, as a streamer who can give that you know, opportunity, door, role model for someone who wants to play a game, and then start there.
100% from the competitive scene. A girl who I used to play on a team with, she was just someone I found online, and I thought, would you like to join my team? Started talking to her, and that's how it happened. And a year later, she's now actually playing in a mixed team, and she's the only female in the team, but she's holding her own against all these other male players. She's competing in a male-dominated league. It's incredible to think that someone who you just started a random conversation with online, these role models, it's crazy to think that these role models can actually be so close to you, and that it's just a simple, you just have to simply start a conversation, honestly. Yeah.
Like, it comes back to what we were saying about opportunity. Like, even if you just look at the amount of women and women's sports teams that are shown on general television versus men, right? Like, it's literally just what people are being exposed to, and so many of us have a responsibility. Anybody working in media, anybody who has the ability to spotlight people, has the responsibility of connecting those who need role models to those role models. And just like to what you were saying just then about like what little things you were mulling over, like boys will be boys. The boy is pulling your hair probably because he likes you. All these things that get drilled into you when you're a kid. Like, it's absolutely when you're saying, oh, I wonder if it's to do with, you know, I wonder if it starts at an early age. It absolutely does. And you just need to see how many girls love programming and math in primary school and then hate it in high school to see the way that school and those cultures and environments can totally change a person's perspectives of themselves.
I think we need to, as a culture, sit down and have a think about puberty, because like the youth soccer teams are all mixed until under 11s. They go, oh, now their bodies are risking starting to be different. Like, who cares? Like, when I used to referee soccer, like the women's teams played harder than the men's teams. Like, they had no qualms about going in for hard tackles. So like, I don't think that this idea that we should like protect the girls from getting hurt because the boys are big and scary. Like, no, like, I think we could all do with watching some arrogant young kid get stomped by a tough girl. Like,
this might be the nerdiest thing that I've ever said, but if you haven't ever watched Quidditch being played, like actual physical Quidditch, it is one of the coolest things because it's all mixed teams. They have phenomenal gender-related rules in terms of the way that those mixed teams work, and the women just tackle men to the floor. It is amazing. So yeah, if you haven't seen that, I would highly recommend it. I think that a lot of other sports could learn from the sorts of things that Quidditch did when it kind of developed its full set. So yeah, definitely highly recommend finding some YouTube videos of that.
You are a terrible nerd.
Thank you. You're the one on the Quidditch team at the uni.
I mean, I'm on a break because I broke a rib.
Playing Quidditch.
It's a full contact sport. I swear. No, it is though.
He got shouldered in the chest by another person. It happens.
I hope it was a female.
I didn't realize that we were going to talk about Quidditch. I would have read up on it.
Sorry.
You've got homework now.
Any other questions from the audience?
talking about role models, obviously in Overwatch League and a bunch of the other pro scenes, there's players who seem to act out, and it's always very quickly forgiven. XQC, for example, I'm not a fan. How, I guess, do you think the devs or the organization organizers or someone needs to kind of crack down? I mean, a football player makes a wrong tackle and he's out for a bad tackle and he's gone for 2 games, or other sporting where they're gone for the entire game, or there's some repercussion that seems maybe fitting or not so fitting for the punishment. So do you guys have any opinions on that? And maybe people that are watching these pro players are like, oh man, like Mickey, everybody loves Mickey. Mickey's always smiling, he's so positive, he's a great role model, but they're looking at the players who get all the spotlight, right? Who maybe aren't necessarily the best role models. So I'm just curious if you guys have thoughts.
Having an overlap between, what's professional foul and what's like professional poor human behaviour would be good, because I think like there's a lot of sports in Australia and overseas where like if you do something wrong in the game, then you get penalised. But if you're like abusing your spouse, whatever, like maybe one of the sponsors thinks, yeah, we will pull out sponsorship, but there are repercussions for bad behaviour outside of the game, and a lot of the problems in these esports teams are happening in the game as well. Like plenty of people, use a homophobic slur or racist language or whatever, and it gets sort of blown up on the internet for a few days, and sometimes there are long-standing repercussions, but not always. I would be cautious about getting developers to step into the competitive scene, because it can get messy, but at the same time, like maybe it needs something to change.
I think tournaments need stronger code of conducts, and they need teams themselves need to have stronger codes of conduct. But yeah, like what you were saying, I think the same needs to be said for basically every competitive sport. I think that football needs to step up. Like you were saying, obviously there are some great penalties in game behaviour, but wouldn't it be great if the men who sexually assault women in bars also get banned from something, maybe?
Like bars.
Yeah.
That'd be a good start.
Right.
Right? Like, geez. So yeah, I think those sorts of things need to come in across the board, and I feel very pessimistic, but I think it all just continually comes back to being like, hey, society as a general thing needs to kind of do better.
I think, so I've previously worked with the AESA, and they're an association that focus on, ensuring that there is fair play across the industry. With the code of conduct, a lot of tournaments actually do implement these. There are certain, for example, like they're banned for a couple of seasons, or they're fined this much out of their prize money, or they're completely removed from the tournament as a whole. And also with, the whole forgiveness thing, like I completely understand, really good players are hard to come by, especially those who market themselves really well, and an organisation really doesn't want to drop a player like that. But at the end of the day, it's about the brand, and if that's what's best for the organisation, it needs to happen. I've seen a lot of players being dropped from teams because they've said particular things, and they've actually released public statements apologising about it, explaining what happened. And yeah, I completely understand, and yeah, it is unfair when it is forgiven quickly, but it needs to be reinforced more.
I think you've got to take pseudonyms out of professional esports. Put themselves liable with their own name for what they're saying. Remove that character, remove that personality that they portray online, in the game. Make themselves be completely accountable for what they say inside the game, outside the game, and for anything that they do with that professional sport. If they do that outside, then you can go straight to, hey, this is now the legal name of the person that has now abused me. However, if there's no mixing up, changing it, it's there.
It's like when you're in uniform.
Yeah.
I guess in game you're in uniform. Outside of the game, you're not necessarily in uniform. You're responsible for yourself.
Okay, so last question. So I'm going to get a little bit meta here, like I said. So I agreed to chair this diversity and inclusion panel. I do a lot of work around diversity and inclusion, and so I end up finding myself spending a lot of my time talking about my identity as a researcher and not the content of my research. And it can be a little bit tiring to be doing this work all the time, and it can be a struggle for me personally, because I want to be known first, I want to be seen first as a kick-ass researcher, and second as a kick-ass woman. And so, what advice do you have from your own experiences doing this work and this kind of labor of diversity and inclusion for people in here who might be getting tired of kind of carrying the flag?
So I totally get that. I think that the emotional labour that comes from continually talking about myself and what I do can be super draining. And I think that's one of the reasons why I founded the charity that I did, because it means that the emotional labour can become actual labour, it can become financial work. And I think that if you are getting tired, part of what you need to do is work out who the places are, what the resources are that can be quickly used in place of yourself. And whilst that's still labour, linking to those things, that's less labour than fully explaining things again and again and again. And so one of the reasons I started the charity that I have is so that people, particularly queer folk, but all marginalised people, have a resource where they can say, hey, I don't have the emotional space right now to explain this to you as I have many, many other people, but there's this organisation that could tell you more, that has the resources that will help you inform yourself. And if a person is asking you questions in good faith, they should take that and think, thank you, and go and do that. And if they challenge you and say, oh, well, then you obviously just don't know, then they probably aren't actually genuinely asking you questions anyway. They are just trying to have a fight with you. And at that point, it's not worth fighting them back anyway. So if it's race related, there are definitely organisations that are fantastic for that. If it's queer related, my charity is for that. There are great things for women in games, there are great things for accessibility and disability in games. So basically just trying to find those resources so you have them handy and using that as a way of responding rather than using your own emotional labour is the only kind of tip I have, I think, handy.
You never expect it, but I don't have that problem as much.
I'm sure.
Yeah, no. You know, I look pretty normative, which makes the particularly tough thing for me not getting pushback when I explain to people that I'm a 26-year-old Indigenous man with chronic health conditions, including chronic pain and chronic fatigue, from a fracture in my L5 vertebra. I'm not what I look like on the surface, which confuses a lot of people, and they struggle with that as a concept. So while I don't sort of have to do a lot of the same sort of work, getting seen for my work first and my identity second, that is almost worse for me because I've had to fight so hard to try and establish what my identity is and have people actually believe it. So yeah, a lot of my struggles are being in a room where people make jokes about Aboriginal people stealing things or, sniffing paint, thinking that everyone in the room is white, so it's fine. And then also struggling with a lot of people who aren't welcoming or accepting because I am white and I get all that passing privilege. So yeah, it's really, that's sort of the main struggle for me, but I get all of the privilege that comes with looking like a straight white man, despite, most of those terms being enacted to certain degrees. So yeah, it's, that's probably enough. I have the least amount of problems, so who cares? But yeah, it's not always straightforward.
Yeah, for me, it's clear that I get misidentified as someone with a Spanish name and with a clearly Australian accent. So, race is a big thing for me. Even though most of the time it is very frequently mocked, actually right in front of my face, it's emotionally draining to bring it up and put them back down because they think that because of the personality that they already know is a larrikin, it's fine. So you're right, putting them to the right direction or actually just bringing them aside and saying, hey, come on, let's just settle this. It's not really something that should happen is really emotionally draining. So I think you're absolutely right, putting them in the right direction. If they're willing to defend themselves, why are you still defending yourself? You've done it anyway.
I'm I'm very lucky to actually be part of a member of the community called Women's. It's an Australian, it's a group of Australian and New Zealand women who are in the esports industry, run by Brie J and Macy. They're both incredible women, and we all pretty much share we share it all together. It is definitely very exhausting sometimes, but we find a lot of comfort, within each other, and we sort of try to empower each other to keep on going. Keep going, keep doing this, do what's right. Yeah.
So find some support and stay strong. Okay, so I'd like to thank our panelists, Dakota, Alana, Miguel, and Stephanie, one more time. I'd also like to say a special thank you to Kelly Vella, who organized. She also found funding for your lunch today, and invited our panelists and organized this whole thing. So thank you, Kelly. And thank you all for attending and for listening and for being open. And so we'll be back here at 2 o'clock for an afternoon of